Hi, so the generation of power is of course a real worry for us. Our power consumption is shooting up, the population is going up, our power needs are almost exponential in their growth. And of course we have the concurrent problems of climate change courtesy of traditional power generation, which is essentially based on burning stuff, and that's not seen as the best thing to do. So there are two competing options at the moment. One is the move towards green energy with wind and solar and wave, and the other is the move towards nuclear, and both camps have their supporters. Now, nuclear power is tremendously popular in some countries, like France for instance, where 95% of the power they produce is nuclear based. And then of course you have the complete opposite, where you have Japan, courtesy of Fukushima. They have no nuclear power. They shut it down completely, because that's one of the problems with nuclear. It may be tremendously safe, it may well be the most regulated industry in the entire world, but unfortunately it only takes one accident to cause a lot of damage, and of course over the years we've had quite a few. So nuclear has a bit of a bad reputation. Now, when we think of nuclear power, we're actually thinking of a particular kind of nuclear power, because there are two types of nuclear power. There is nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. Nuclear fission is the one that we use. It's the one where we take the nuclear material, allow it to break down, generate heat, and then we use that to create steam and generate from. And there are various flavours of that, with the latest, greatest popular one being thorium salt reactors. There's a whole group of nuclear reactions that have been developed and nuclear reactors that are being built. But there's another kind of nuclear reaction, and that is the nuclear fusion reaction. Now, nuclear fusion is one of those great dreams, because fusion is the way the sun runs. And if we can do that on Earth, we'll have this unlimited power supply that is much, much greener. And it's very attractive for that. But it has itself a series of problems. And one of them is, for the last 70 years, they've been saying nuclear power is 30 years away. And if you ask a nuclear fusion scientist, he'll tell you, oh yeah, fusion, it's 30 years away. It's been the same for such a long time, because there's a stalling point there. Now, to understand the stalling point, we need to know a little bit more about nuclear fusion. So fusion of itself is in fact a very simple process. All we actually have to do is take an atom, which is a positively charged nucleus surrounded by negatively charged electrons, strip away the electrons, and we get a positive charged nucleus. And if we have enough of those in a space where we can contain them, they will hit each other. They hit each other, they will fuse, and they will give out energy. So it's quite a simple process. But the challenge really is that in order to strip away those electrons, we have to make the thing incredibly hot. We have to create a plasma. And when you create a plasma, which is a sort of gaseous liquid of positive charged particles, it's incredibly reactive. There is no known material that can actually contain that in a bottle, which is what we need to do. Now, there are options on how to contain it, and there are in fact two options. Have you ever noticed how lots of things come down to two options and we seem to choose one or the other? We can contain it in a magnetic field, or we can contain it in an electrical field. Of course, we've chosen to contain it in a magnetic field, and that's where most of the research is. And that magnetic field machine is called a tokamak, and it holds that plasma in space, actually in more of a donut, but it holds it in one place where we can actually get that reaction. Now, of course, there's been lots and lots of research in that, and they are still failing to reach fusion, which is disappointing considering the money and the research. But there is another way of actually containing this, and that is to use an electrical field. An electrical field is an electrostatic field in this case, so you create a very high negative charge and a very high positive charge, and that creates a trap, a bottle for the plasma to sit in. Now, the first experiments on inertial electrostatic confinement, which is what this is called when it comes to holding the plasma in an electrical field, were actually about the 1930s with Cockcroft and Wheaton. It didn't go very far. It was much more of a curiosity, and it was theorised that it could be done. but it was Philo T. Farnsworth that is considered to a greater or lesser degree as the father of electrostatic confinement, or IEC, inertial electrostatic confinement. Now, Farnsworth was originally a television engineer. He was working with television vacuum tubes when he noticed that in some tubes, under some conditions, the electrons formed a cloud, and that cloud would stay there. Now that's extremely interesting, and what Farnsworth did was work with that, and in 1962 published his patent where he created a device that if he put in 25,000 kilovolts, he would create a positively charged shell. And of course this would repel all those positively charged ions into the centre, and that plasma was contained. Now, he had various problems with it, of course, and it was picked up by Hirsch in 1964. 1964 to 1967, Hirsch worked with that, injecting further ions through an ion beam into this shell-like construction, and fusion happened. Now, this is the basis of the Farnsworth-Hirsch fusor that you see all over the internet. It is such a simple device that you find teenagers creating it in their bedroom, and the thing about it is, it actually works, because when that fusion occurs, a neutron is given off, and that neutron can be measured and is a measure of how much fusion is occurring in the centre of that fusor. And these devices that, as I say, are being constructed all over the place. There's lots of things on the internet. There are fusor builder groups, and nuclear fusion is happening in bedrooms across the world, which I found fascinating. The issue with it is that the amount of energy given out is much less at the moment than the amount of energy that you use to give that energy out. And that's obviously a problem. And it was picked up in the 80s by Bussard. This is of Bussard collector fame, and he created a series of fusers called the polywell. Now, the polywell is actually a combined device. It puts a magnetic field inside of an electrostatic field, and it was started work on by Bussard in 1983. And he started a company called EMC Squared. Who wouldn't? And he continued work on that, starting with the WB1 right the way through to the WB6. So he made 6 polywell models, each progressively getting better and better. And it was in 2005 when he ran WB6 that he actually got net positive energy out, and that was the first time anybody had got nuclear fusion where the energy out was greater than the energy in, and you would think that would be exciting, and it was exciting. Unfortunately, it was also the time of the Iraq War, because Bussard did a lot of his work under DARPA and the Navy. And when funding was reduced, their 2005 funding was something like $900,000 or something like that. And of course, this is not a cheap hobby, so $900,000 doesn't take you very far. And it was quietly backburnered in 2005. But they received a lot of interest, and they were able to continue their work beyond WB6. They built another WB6 to prove and verify their results, and then built a WB7 later on. Unfortunately, of course, Bussard died in 2007, and his work was taken up by Nobel and Park at Los Alamos, a couple of personal heroes of mine, actually. They took up the work and progressed it right up to, I think they're at WB8 now. There have been other developments and changes to it, and Nobel particularly was responsible for something called the periodic oscillating plasma sphere, or the POPS system. And that POPS system is now undergoing review because it is a net positive fusion generator, the first kind in the world. There have, of course, been various other machines, like the marble machine, for instance. That ran into technical difficulties, and there's an awful lot more fusion companies suddenly springing up. And when that kind of thing happens, then you know that there's that much more interest in what's going on. Now, it's 2018 when Nobel and Parks published their patent on the design of the polywell. So the design of the polywell version they're using is actually out there, and it was in 2019 that the University of Sydney took it up, and you're finding replications going on all over the place now. So there are replications of the polywell versions going on. There are companies springing up with variants of this to try and be the first in the race to be the fusor designer, because of course having a fuser, having something that can create nuclear fusion is much safer, greener, smaller, less energy intensive. I mean, we talked about tokamaks right at the beginning of the video. A tokamak is massive. It's so huge and uses a 1 meter thick blanket of lithium around it. So these are very expensive machines to create and to have fail. Whereas fusers and nuclear fusion inertial electrostatic confinement devices are very much smaller, very much cheaper, and are producing net energy output, which is obviously extremely exciting for us. So for all those people who like nuclear, the nuclear fission is probably on its way out. Nuclear fusion is probably only 30 years away. Anyway, I thought I would give you a brief history of the fuser, nuclear fusion, where we are with nuclear fusion, how it differs from fission, and how it could be a very good potential for our energy needs for the future. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and please remember, like and subscribe.